Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. It is time for my November reading wrap-up, so let's go on with talking about the 5 books that I read in November. The first book that I completed in the month of November was a reread of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This story is set in the 1930s. It is centered around a little girl named Jean Louise, also known as Scout, and it follows 2 kind of storylines. The first storyline has to do with Scout, her older brother Jim, and their friend Dill, and those 3 children are basically trying to get the local recluse to leave his house. The other half of the story is about their father Atticus, who is a lawyer, and he is defending a black man who is accused of raping a white woman, and what happens because of him trying to defend this man. I was super happy to reread this book, first of all because I hadn't read it since I read it for required reading in 8th grade. I remember really loving it when I read it in 8th grade, but there were quite a few details about the book that I had forgotten, and it was really cool just re-experiencing it as an adult, but also just kind of rediscovering Harper Lee's writing style, which I had forgotten that was like the main reason why I loved this book, was because I really love how she describes things and really interprets the situations and shows different things about the characters. Something that I really thought was cool that I picked up on this reread of this story was the real theme of understanding others. In the book, Atticus says something to the extent of, you can't understand a person unless you walk a mile in their shoes or step into their shoes. And the fact that this book really is about that theme, not just in terms of the racial issues that are discussed in this book, it is an important part of this book, but it is not the only part of like seeing, understanding through different people's eyes. I think there are many instances throughout the book where Scout is learning to see something from somebody else's perspective. I think it's a really important message to really like have empathy for the things that are going on in people's life. It might not excuse like bad behavior or anything like that, but if you can like have empathy and understanding on where that stuff is coming from, you know, you might have a better experience dealing with that person. And I think that is what the book is really about. So this is still for sure one of my favorite books. I am looking forward to reading it again sometime, another time. And it is, of course, a 5-star book to me because I just loved it. I finally finished The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This book is about a young man named D'Artagnan who is trying to get a place in the Musketeers' service, and the Musketeers are the guardians of the King of France. And he ends up meeting 3 Musketeers that are friends and kind of befriending them, and the rest of the story is kind of their adventures. I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't love this book as much as I wanted to. I just sorta liked it because there's definitely some things that I really like about this book. I do love the espionage plots. I do love the fight scenes. I really love the characters. They are very witty and amusing. I also like that they have kind of interesting backstories. This book is like really melodramatic, but it like is aware of its melodrama. It's kind of like almost making fun of its own melodrama, and I think that is kind of a fun element of the story. But this does some things in it that I just strongly dislike, and it's only 2 things, but they're 2 things that usually make me dock a star like right away when I read a book. And the first thing is, if you followed me for a long time, you know that I don't like unnecessarily long sentences, and Dumas is very fond of unnecessarily long sentences. And that's also kind of feeding into my second thing that I didn't like, is that this book meanders like nobody's business. Like, I really did want it to stick to the main plots and things, and it would just deviate to these random kind of boring, not necessarily interesting things. That was really irritating to me. I found both the long sentences and the meandering really distracting. I think you could have cut 200 or 300 pages of this and it still would have been a really entertaining book. When this book does stick to the point and stays with the characters and the espionage plots and the fight scenes, it is really good in those points and really strong. So I do think it's worth a read. I don't know if it's worth a unabridged read because it was taking me so long to finish this book, because it took me like 4 months to complete this book all in all. About a third of the way in, I decided to switch to reading this in audiobook, and I picked the audiobook read by Bill Homewood, I believe is the name of the reader. And I did enjoy it a little bit more that way. The long sentence thing came across a little better. I could like ear scan some of the parts that weren't particularly interesting to me instead of like trying to scan with my eyes past this part, because there was a lot of scannage going on. The reader did a really good job with getting the tone of the book as well as really doing something fun with the characters, and he also pronounced all the French terms and all the French names correctly. If you're looking for an audiobook of this, I would recommend that one. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. I am really glad that I read it. I'm glad that I kind of know what is in this book, and I would probably read the subsequent books in the series because I do kind of want to know what happens to the characters. But I feel like if I read the subsequent books, I would either find the abridged versions or I would listen to them on audiobook, and now I know that. Next up are a couple of Christmassy themed reads. So the first Christmas book that I ended up reading was The Christmas Box by Richard Paul Evans. This book is about a man and his wife and his young child, and they all go move into a mansion to live with this older woman because this older woman needs companionship as well as help with like chores like cooking and cleaning and things like that. Through living with this older woman and also through the finding of a mysterious Christmas box, this man learns about the spirit of Christmas and the first gift of Christmas. So The Christmas Box is a book that I reread a lot during Christmas time. It just gets me into the Christmas spirit, and I just really enjoy kind of the lessons that the characters learn. I mean, not a ton happens in this book because it is such a short little novella-sized book, but I think it does what it's supposed to do, and it makes me really happy to read it. I will say in my reread of this that I did notice that the writing style is like really straightforward. There's not like a lot of beautiful sentence-ship or anything, but I don't think that was what the author was going for. I think he basically wrote this story for his daughters, so he kind of wants it to be a straightforward writing style and a straightforward story. Even though if I'd written it, I probably would have like made it like more beautimous in terms of the writing style. I still really love the book, and so I still gave this book 5 stars because it's just my Christmas tradition fun read. I also ended up rereading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which is of course the story of Mr. Scrooge, who just hates Christmas and how he learns about the Christmas spirit. Christmas Carol is of course just another short, really great novelic type read that I love reading at Christmas time. It's really cool that both the Christmas Box and the book A Christmas Carol share a sort of theme that there is sort of like a bitter sweetness to it, which I think really makes the meaning of the story come through, but also kind of shows how you have to like have some of those Christmas spirit lessons continue on, not just at Christmas time. I think this story is so cool in the way that it kind of is humorous and also is very serious, and I really enjoy the way that Charles Dickens wrote this in terms of what he does with character and things like that in just this like really short book. I kind of ended up switching between reading this in print and also reading this in audiobook because I was on a road trip with reading both my Christmas books and I was in the dark, so I couldn't like sit and read this in the car in the dark. So I had it on audiobook for that reason, and I ended up downloading an audiobook from the LibriVox app. This is basically a site/app where volunteers record books that are in the public domain, and because of that, then you can get the audiobook for free. So I listened to a dramatized version, which I believe is called version 8 of A Christmas Carol, and if you decide to check that out, it's totally free. It's a really fun way to experience this book for sure. I think all the readers that were involved in it did a really good job. I highly recommend experiencing this book if you've never read it before, because it is just like the ultimate Christmas read, and you must do. So I gave this one 5 stars as well. The last book that I ended up completing was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, which is the first book in a series of books. This book starts out with a man named Arthur. He is having a not so great day, and his day gets even worse when it is announced that aliens are going to basically destroy the Earth. Fortunately, Arthur's best friend Ford turns out to be an alien, and Ford saves the day by helping him and Arthur escape out into the universe before the Earth is totally and completely decimated. Wacky travels throughout the galaxy, as well as the impending journey to discover the meaning of life, the universe, and everything ensues. So this book is quite a bit of fun. I understand why a lot of people enjoy this, because it is super wacky and kind of unexpected. It definitely throws some wacky stuff at you, and you're just supposed to like catch it and go on. But I think that's kind of fun, first of all, because it gives the book a real fun tone of humor. It does have a kind of Britishy sense of humor, and it also kind of gives the characters some really interesting witty dialogue through all the craziness that is going on, and I like that element of it for sure. It also makes the book just kind of unexpected and keeps you reading because you want to know what is gonna go on next. Also, through reading this book, so many things that have been referencing this book suddenly make sense to me, like so many Coldplay songs. Don't Panic, Yellow, 42. Also, I am led to think that Fox Mulder's apartment number in X-Files has a deeper meaning, because 42. You getting it? If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. I definitely found this really highly entertaining and enjoyed it very much. The only reason I can't see it being like an uber super favorite is because I think I want like more from the characters. Like, I think I am somebody that reads books that are more character driven than this book. I feel like these characters are really fun, but they might not be that interesting if like crazy stuff wasn't happening to them. So even though I enjoyed them, like, they don't bother me. I think that I like characters that have a little bit more psychology behind them than this book, and maybe as I continue on with the series, like, something will happen and I will change my opinion on that, but for right now, that's kind of where I am. So I gave The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy 4 stars. I definitely recommend reading it because it is very enjoyable. On to my TBR for the month of December. This TBR might be a little ambitious. As you might know, I do make a TBR for the whole year, and this year I kind of made a secondary TBR because there were books that I knew that I just wasn't going to get to this year, but there were certain books that I for sure knew that I wanted to get to, or I was going to be like a sad face emoji. There were only 5 books left on like the emergency TBR list, and I'm going to try to get to all of those in the month of December. So the first one is just to finish the rest of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. Then I'm about 30 pages into Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. Since I reread To Kill a Mockingbird, I just want to read this one and see how they compare, since this was kind of the original thought that Harper Lee had for the book at first. So I'm just going to continue reading. I want to read Othello by William Shakespeare. Never read this play before. I am familiar with the story in general. Hoping to watch a version of it first. If you know a really good version of Othello that's been filmed, let me know in the comments, because I do kind of enjoy watching them before reading them. Next book up is Christopher Moore's The Serpent of Venice. This is the second book in a duology which follows the book Fool, which I read earlier in the year. I want to read Othello before reading this one because this duology kind of is a humorous and kind of very wacky look at different Shakespearean literature as well as other kind of literature. And I believe that this one contains some stuff about Othello in it. I want to be in on the Othello jokes that might show up because I felt like knowing some of the like literature before reading Fool made Fool more funny. So I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. Last but not least, I want to get to reading Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. I'm hoping to complete this, but it is rather long. So even if I just get started on this before the end of December, I think I will be happy. That was my November wrap up as well as my December TBR. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Let me know what you read in November and what you really enjoyed. I have also left the links to all the books that I've read in my affiliate links down below. So if there's any books in this video that you found really interesting, you can definitely check out those links and get those books if you so feel led. And that is it for today. Thank you for watching, fabulous people. Bye!